Yeah, it says we alive. Excellent. So sorry if we are a few minutes late. We have had some technical difficulties, shall we say? But here we are. And we are super excited for tonight's live. We have got two powerhouses of knowledge tonight, so we are super lucky and super grateful that these guys are joining us tonight to talk all about ears, ear infections, probiotics, you name it, and we are hopefully going to answer all your questions. We have got the lovely Jo that I think everyone already knows from Ingenious Probiotics, and we have got the wonderful Richard Doyle as well joining us. So I am very grateful to have you both here tonight. We've had loads of questions in. I did have them on my email as well to reference, but I seem to have lost them. But thankfully, these guys are a little bit more organised than me and have the questions to hand. So without further ado, do we know where we want to start, or do you guys want to introduce yourselves a little bit more?
Well, I'm struggling to keep a straight face when you said organized and looked at us. Like all our preparation time has been spent on the technical side, and thanks, Lindsay. Um,
We like swans, Joe. We like swans on the pond. Ooh.
yeah, great fun. So we're jamming, we're winging it, but we do have quite a few questions come in, which was really great, and some of them were quite wide. Broad sweeping questions to give us a really wide platform to answer on. And I'm going to talk less than most people are used to hearing me talk because Richard's here. And I'm gonna not demonstrate my ignorance. I'm going to let Richard do some talking. Um,
Do we want to explain? Do you want to explain who you are a little bit, Richard? Because some of our members maybe don't actually know who you are.
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Richard Doyle. I'm a veterinary surgeon. I work, well, I'm a part owner and vet at the Wiley Veterinary Centre. We're based in Upminster in Essex. We're a small animal practice. We're a 24-hour hospital. Just to give you a sense of the business, we employ about 120 odd members of staff, 25 of whom are vets. So we're quite a big practice. We are still independent and proudly so. Um, I'm basically a clinician. I have a certificate in internal medicine, so a fair chunk of my work is just medicine cases, including, you know, everything that's going GI problems, ear problems, skin problems, heart problems. And a certificate in internal medicine is basically a certificate in generalism. So yeah, I'm happy, very happy to share my thoughts and ideas about and my experience of treating patients with ear problems. It's a problem that lots and lots of pets suffer with, and obviously we see, and it's a great source of annoyance to both pets and their owners. So yeah, happy to yeah to chat about it and
Uh,
give you any
So,
insights that
so,
I,
so very grateful that you've joined us tonight, and all of those things that you mentioned, we see lots and lots of that: gut problems, skin problems, ear problems, the feet, or you name it, we see it an awful lot. So we're super grateful that you're here and super excited. So
oh, thanks for having me.
over to you, Joe.
I'm Joe.
We
So
know Joe
uh,
for
uh,
you.
not everybody knows our background into this, but we got involved in the microbiome through awareness of what we call health and wellness in the built environment. That was our area. In other words, for people and animals inside a building of any kind, including your car or your restaurant or your home, um, to do with what your exposure was to chemicals, what you were breathing in, and so on. And that was our in with probiotics is where we started in odor control and looking at the microbiome and the surfaces in the home and the workplace, and that very quickly moved on to the microbiome and the surface of animals in particular. humans too, but the main focus has been animals. So the microbiome of the skin, and of course the ear is just an extension of that, and I guess the gums and dental are an extension to that. So a few years ago, we started working with Richard, and some of his experiences were very inspirational for us. So I personally am delighted to have Richard here beside us because he's been a real inspiration for us and a number of our clients and a number of other vets that we've spoken to. So he really is holistic in the whole sense, you know. So looks at the wide picture. So his experience, particularly with ears, is what's brought this tonight. You know, we could do a whole other one on dental and a whole other one on skin, but
Absolutely.
tonight is with ears. So that's what's brought us to here. We've in the past few years, as a non-vet, as a non medical person, we've gotten to know quite a bit more than we should about ears and so on. And a lot of that has been from questions that people watching this will have been asking us. So we've been building up a portfolio of a great resource, lots of information, and where people have asked us questions about ears and so on, teeth and skin, and in some cases having to look up the answer and then go back to, and then see the results coming through. So we've put that together. We put it out there through the group for people to come and ask some questions, which we've got here between Richard and myself. Also, some people have emailed directly in today and yesterday, um, the same. So we're going to answer those as in a real time thing, real questions people have asked and real answers that we're about to give. And hopefully some people are going to find it darn useful for their pets, their dogs in particular. Because as Richard says, it's crazy the amount of ear issues that are out there. So,
Absolutely.
mm, um, Karla, because we did so much preparation for this, not worrying about technical issues at all. Um, I'm thinking if it's okay with you, we could just start into one of the
Mm.
one of the questions
Yeah,
and take it from there.
absolutely. Just work our way through them.
Hmm.
That's,
And I'll say as well, if we don't cover a question that's been asked, or if somebody posts a question tonight, if we don't get round to it, because I think we had quite a lot of questions come through. If we don't get round to it, they'll all be answered.
yeah,
Um, so if you've posted it, we'll answer it in the group. If you've emailed us in, we'll respond with that um, in kind. Okay, so in no particular order, and some of these were really wide ranging. So I'm trying to pick the ones as well that answer other people's questions where we possibly can, if we possibly can. That is okay. Um, so the first one I'm going to start with actually is Lindsay, because I think Lindsay deserves having his question answered first.
absolutely. Lived
Technical
it
assistance.
nice, didn't
So I'm just going to read it out because I think this has been something we found interesting to read the questions out as the pet owner
he? Yeah,
has asked it, not as how we have interpreted it
yeah.
and the nuances and concerns and so on to come out of that. So if I read it out um and then I just pass over to Richard for the hard bit. So it's great, you know. So my rescue Staffy had ear infections monthly for over 2 years. We are 19 months free of infection. He has smaller ear canals due to the amount of infections. I think that's also a breed thing, isn't it, in some cases? Is there anything I can do to help him, to help stop a flare-up? I already clean his ears weekly with Otidine and Otact, and he is on PEA supplement. Nice one. Thank you. Um, this is a great question, actually, Richard, because one of the things we see in the group, as well as questions that we get sent in, is people talking about flare-ups, and
Mm.
people might say, "Oh, every time my boy or my girl gets a flare-up, I do X, Y, and Z, and it's
Mm.
great." And I'm always thinking, shouldn't be a flare-up, you
Mm.
know. And I love the way Lindsay's written this to sort of prevent flare-ups.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so what can we do? He's had a history. What can we do to prevent flare-ups?
Good question, and a question that often comes up. Before I try to answer it, I'd just like to say that, from the vet's perspective, whenever we're presented with a problem, ultimately the first thing to try and do is make a diagnosis, try and find out what is the underlying cause of these symptoms, because obviously we can treat the symptoms, and we've got a whole variety, a whole wide range of different medications and treatment modalities that we can use. But until we actually identify what the underlying problem is, we're not actually likely to get a long-term cure. So when it comes to ears, the ear may seem like a very simple organ because you can see it. But actually, it's very complex. It's obviously, as Joe said earlier, it's part of the skin, but it's got its own unique properties because for the most part, it's hairless. So it's exposed to anything that's going on in, that's flying around in the air, potentially allergens. It's easy for water and foreign bodies to get in there. Once they're in there, there's this very specific and unique microenvironment, which is the external ear, which goes down to the ear canal, the eardrum, the tympanic membrane. Then on the other side of that, you've got the otitis media, or the middle ear, which is connected to the throat. So in order to try to understand why a given individual keeps getting flare-ups or even has a one-off, one really has to understand the full complexity of the anatomy. So it's quite possible that a dog with a sore throat, a pharyngitis, could get an ear infection because that infection could go up the eustachian tube into the middle ear and then affect the eardrum and ultimately the external ear. And of course, because it's a warm, dark, moist environment, it's quite prone to pathogenic infection. So, when presented with a bad ear, all of these thoughts must be going through our minds as to, okay, what's actually caused this? I have to say, what I see a lot of is allergic ear disease. But allergic ear disease isn't the only possibility. I've mentioned a couple of others. Water gets into the ear, creates a warm, moist environment, which becomes inflamed. The ear, naturally, its natural defense mechanisms is to produce serum and to produce ooze and gunk. And pathogens just love that environment. So allergies very common, but there are many other causes, including primary bacterial infections, including foreign bodies, including throat infections. In the world of allergies, and this is, in my experience anyway, this is probably the most common underlying cause for recurrent ear infections. So allergies, dogs can develop allergies to pretty well anything, but commonly we see seasonal allergies where dogs are developing allergies to seasonal allergens, pollens and certain grasses that are floating around in the air certain times of the year. These pollens get onto the hairless parts of the body, so the ears, the muzzle, the underbelly, the paws, and cause an allergic reaction. So an allergic reaction is a systemic reaction. It results in inflammation in those parts, but internally there's also an inflammatory process going on. Dietary allergies are also very common underlying allergies for recurrent ear problems. And actually quite a few of the questions, people have said that their dogs were on commercial diets, but they switched them to raw, or what we call species appropriate diets, and the ear problems have reduced dramatically, sometimes gone away completely. But these are all skin or ear responses to systemic allergic reactions. So in the case of an allergy, if we want to effect a long-term cure, we have to figure out what actually this individual is allergic to. Is it an element of the diet? Is it something in the air? Is it seasonal? Could it be a pollen or a grass? Or is it year round? Is it house dust? I have to say, in theory, that's all very simple and straightforward, but in reality, the world of allergies is a dark and murky space.
Very difficult.
Very, very difficult.
Very
A lot
difficult.
of cases to actually pinpoint what it is. And when we go to the full extent of figuring out what it is, through blood tests, through diet trials, we find that allergic individuals are usually allergic to a number of different factors, maybe one or two dietary factors, like say chicken protein and house dust and flea bites and some kind of pollen. So just trying to get your head around, all right, well, how do we control all of this, is very difficult and challenging. But ultimately, that's where our thoughts need to be in terms of how we solve these kind of problems, or at least manage them in the long term. So, in terms of, if it's, say, a dietary allergy, then ultimately finding out what that allergen is and avoiding.
That's kind of what we try to do in the group when anybody presents with almost anything, whether it's ears, paws, gut issues. Before we say, oh, do this, do that, we ask a big long set of questions. What do you feed? What treats do you give? What was the dog previously fed? Do you use any cleaners around the home? Do you use any air fresheners? Is the dog vaccinated? Is the chemical free and wormed? What water do you give?
Yeah.
And what stress as well? Not just, we ask, is there any stress in your life or your dog's life? And people are like, why do you want to know if I'm stressed? And I'm like, because all of these things, it's a big picture that we need to try. And it's so hard to try and, but that's kind of what we do. And we do get a good amount of success. But like you say, that's where you need to be, isn't it? Getting to the root cause, so then you don't have the flare-ups or reduce the flare-ups.
Yeah, no, precisely. And if one could wave a magic wand and identify what it was and eliminate that from the dog's environment, whether it be a food element or whether it be something in the air and an atopic allergen, and wave a magic wand and just get rid of it, then problem solved. But in the world we live in, the real world we live in, that's usually not possible. So usually we're down to management. So yeah, management comes in all shapes and sizes according to, how severe the problem is, how chronic it is, whether it's a one-off or whether it's a recurrent problem, if it's been going on years or months, which has perhaps resulted in narrowing of the ear canals. Ultimately, in any form of ear disease, there is inflammation. And inflammation is good because it's essentially the body's immune system trying to deal with the problem, whether it be a pathogenic bacteria that's got in there, or whether it be an allergen, or whether it be a foreign body. Inflammation is the body's way of trying to deal with that. So inflammation is good in a sense. However, in the context of an ear, because it's a semi-closed space, inflammation, heat results in moisture and a nice, warm, dark environment where pathogens like Malassezia, which is a yeast, and other bacteria like Pseudomonas is the one that everyone knows about, but there are others as well that flourish in that environment. That environment is created by the process of inflammation. So generally, in terms of trying to manage a bad ear infection, whether it be unilateral or bilateral, usually some form of anti-inflammatory in the acute stages is necessary. It's just damping down the fire so that we can manage the secondary pathogens which are taking advantage of this situation. So typically, some form of anti-inflammatory is indicated, especially in the early stages or acute stages of an infection.
Can I ask what kind you would use, please, Richard? What kind what kind of anti-inflammatory would you use?
My go-to, and I think probably most vets go to, is a tapering dose of corticosteroids,
Mhm.
prednisolone.
Yeah,
By tapering, if I speak of a typical case, and obviously that's already making a generalization because there's no such thing.
yeah,
But generally speaking, I will look at a 2 week course of steroids, tapering it down
right,
over that period of time. Usually after 2 weeks of anti-inflammatory treatment, the ear is much less painful, much easier to work with. And then we've got a fighting chance of topical treatment working. Of course, the other thing is, in the context of pathogens, bacteria, yeasts that have now colonized this abnormal microenvironment, abnormal because it's inflamed, abnormal because it's moist, abnormal because it's dark, it's hot, there's exudate in there. These pathogens are having a field day. So by damping down the inflammation, we're at least controlling quite a number of those factors in there. But then from a management point of view, we now have to deal with the fact that this ear is full of waxy, pussy gunk. So as long as that's in there, it's going to be a problem. So the first, in my opinion anyway, the first goal is to reduce the inflammation. The second goal is to get the gunk out. And the third goal is to try to rebalance the microbiome that's in the ear. Generally speaking, as a general statement, 99% of microbes in any environment, whether we're talking about on our bodies, in our ears, on our faces, on this table, in the garden, in the oceans, anywhere, generally speaking, 99% of the microbes in those environments are commensals, are not harmful, are friendly bacteria and viruses and other microbes. And about 1% of them are pathogens. But that's one of nature's beautiful balances, because there's just enough pathogens to keep the commensals on their toes and to keep the host's defense mechanisms up to speed. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it's an absolutely necessary thing that in any environment, and tonight we're talking about ears, but it's a broad statement.
Part of it.
Of any medical microenvironment and beyond. It's a beautiful balance to have a small number of pathogens and an overwhelming population of commensals or friendly bacteria, keeping those pathogens under control. So ultimately, in the context of an ear, that's goal 3, in my view, of treatment for ears. Reduce the inflammation, get rid of the gunk, and then try to rebalance the biome. So what we at Wiley's have done, generally fairly successfully for many years now, working with Joe and his ear preparation, is to create an overwhelming population of probiotics in the microenvironment of the ear to basically drown out the pathogens that are there. So I've had cases of Pseudomonas that's basically been resistant to every single antibiotic we have available. And I tell you, from as frustrated as people and pets get with Pseudomonas infections, so do vets. I mean, if you mention in any group of vets a Pseudomonas ear infection, it's just, how do we even deal with this?
Really bad, isn't it? Really, really bad.
It's a terrible problem. and from the use and overuse and abuse of antibiotics in the past, we've got these superbugs that are running the show, that are a danger to human life and animal life, and almost impossible to get rid of. And Pseudomonas in dogs' ears is one of those. But I've had a number of cases where we've been through all the diagnostic processes, the cultures, the sensitivities, the application of whatever antibiotic has been suggested by the culture and sensitivity, only to find that we haven't quite solved the problem. We go through all those hoops again, culture, sensitivity. Oh, it's now sensitive to something else. Okay, try that something else. And so we go. And in my very first case, I thought, okay, I'm actually going to try a completely novel approach. I'm going to try a probiotic, and I'm going to try and, flood the pathogen out. I'm just going to make life really difficult for that Pseudomonas by just putting into that ear so many commensal friendly bacteria. That pathogen's not going to know what's hit it. And, in a limited resource, because all these bacteria and microbes, they feed on what's down in the ear. That's what they live on. So if we can limit the resource and then play the odds, create an overwhelming population of friendly bacteria down in that microbiome, in that microenvironment, essentially we can just crowd the pathogen out. And I've had a number of cases myself where we've done that. And we've eliminated Pseudomonas in dogs' ears that we had previously been really, really struggling with. I have to say, the probiotics that are in the ear preparation aren't normal commensals for dogs' ears. So even when the Pseudomonas has gone, ultimately the bacteria that are in the probiotic are not supposed to be there. And so in my experience, what's happened is that the discharge has gone from a smelly, pussy, Pseudomonas-y kind of smelling ear, and during the process of treatment with the probiotic, so the smelliness and the amount of pus that's been produced has slowly declined until we've cultured negative for Pseudomonas. But I have found that there's still a little bit of mucousy gunk in the ears, and I think what the body's immune system is doing in that situation is saying, okay, this is not Pseudomonas, so we're not going to hit it with pus and everything in our armory, but it's still not normal. So we're going to still attack it, but at a lower level. And so from a treatment management point of view, in these cases of Pseudomonas, once we've cultured negative, then I slowly taper off the probiotic over a period of 1 or 2 weeks. And generally speaking, those ears return to normal over a period of time. I have to say, just because life is like that, these cases often require some kind of low-level maintenance, for which we use the probiotic just to keep the pathogens at bay. Just by creating or rebalancing the local biome. So,
do you want me to jump in?
That's a long story, but and I don't even know if I've answered the question.
No, well, that's one of the reasons I love Richard so much. You don't get a yes or no. You get the information that you really want to get, the background and the education that goes with a proper answer. And I've been making notes here because you've actually answered a couple of other questions or touched on a couple of other questions that we've had. And one of them was an interesting one, Kiki Willett. It's not even a question. It's just an observation that one of our friends' dogs was having issues with the ear, and it turned out to be the wool blanket, right?
Indeed.
So when you
Indeed.
talk about the environmental allergies, sometimes because we talk, as you know, we talk a lot about that to our clients, and sometimes people are looking at you going, "Ah, it can't be that." Honestly,
Yeah.
it can't. And so when you think that the ear is an extension of the skin and so on, a bit more complicated, and there's already results out there, tests out there, and studies showing how indoor pollution, for want of
Hmm.
a better word, is affecting canine atopic dermatitis, so dog skin at cellular level, and that's what the ear is. So there is definitely. So you've touched on that. That definitely look at the environment. And again, this is answering Lindsay's question. What can I do? Have a look at the environment. Um,
And
around.
even things that you don't think of, I always ask, like, have you got a new carpet? Have
Mhm.
have you got any new furniture?
Yeah.
Because all of the flame retardants and anti-mold things and God knows what else they put on them. There's all of those things, as well as you're looking at your food and your this and your that. And you've got to really, really look at everything, which, I mean, for the poor owners, it's just an absolute nightmare because you're like, oh, phew.
It's an ever-ending list, really. But I think you're just trying to, for general health, not just ears, you're looking to reduce that toxic load. Take the straw off the camel's back, as we say, one straw at a time.
Yeah.
And at least you're heading in the right direction, whether you get there or not, at least you're getting in the right direction. And you mentioned malassezia, and Harry Collett asked that question. Is it malassezia? Is it candida? But it's malassezia, right?
Always
Yeah,
malassezia,
always
always.
malassezia. And the other ones here you touched about, and
And that's why Candida treatment doesn't generally work. Candida treatment in ears generally doesn't work,
okay, right.
um, because it's not Candida,
It's
it's
not Canada. Yeah,
malassezia.
yeah. Okay, excellent.
General rule of thumb.
And a couple of other things as well. I love the reference um to the balance, the good and bad
Mm,
balance, and it drew my mind back to you telling me about a presentation you went to at the London Vet Show, and they were talking to the vets and saying, look, when you send us a swab of an infected ear, here's the list of bacteria. And when you send us a swab of a non-infected ear, here's the list of bacteria. And it was the same. And it was to do with the balances.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
you might get some of the bad ones in a perfectly healthy ear, but it's
yeah,
all to do with the balance.
yeah.
So when Richard talks about putting the probiotics in there, you're affecting that balance straight out. And Lindsay, this is still part of answering your question, by the way. Um, and touching on the malassezia, um, Ken Warnock and a couple of people actually asked about that, asked about Maria Atkinson. We were talking about Connor's, that's Connor Brady, Connor's anti-yeast, whether we can use the probiotics alongside with that. And I've always said yes, you can, but in a relay race styly, like if you're putting antibiotics into the ear, or you're putting anything like that that's going to reduce the market, start with the probiotics before you finish the antibiotics so you don't leave a gap.
Yeah.
And we say the same about Connor's Propritium.
Mm.
It's in there removing yeast, and it does have some antibacterial effect. So yeah, the answer to that is start with the probiotics almost before you finish that protocol. And again, go back to Lindsay's original question. Um, he's cleaning the ears. Was it once a fortnight, once every couple of weeks, with Otidine, yeah, weekly, beg your pardon, sorry, Otidine and Otact. And again, I would imagine they're products that are going to be reducing the microbiome. And what you're talking about is actually it's sort of increasing that balance, increasing that diversity. So basically putting probiotics in there effectively to help. And the last thing to touch on as well is
Can I just say a
yeah,
quick point there?
jump in.
If there's muck or gunk in an ear or ears, um, that is going to be a resource for whatever microbes are down there. So keeping the ears as clean as possible is a good thing to aim for. Um, just simply physically getting the gunk out.
And is there, because a couple of the questions talk about gunk, Julia Cococchio and Ben laughing, and they mention a yellow gunk.
Yeah,
Now, I know the ear is going to make, some.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
difference between normal amount and
yeah,
yucky amount and smells of it.
yeah.
So is there a little bit of a rule of thumb? I know we shouldn't really go for that, but is there something people can take away and say this amount is okay, this amount is the beginning of a problem, this amount is a lot of a problem?
Yeah,
Have I dropped you in it? Is that the wrong question?
no, it's a very good question that often comes up. And I mean, normal wax is a yellowy orange color. Um, and some individuals produce more wax than others. So the fact that there's a waxy discharge down there doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. On the other side of the spectrum, when it's smelly and it's painful, and it's pussy, then that clearly is. So somewhere on that continuum is an okay amount of discharge. Completely normal is a yellowy orange color. On the other side, a kind of a cheesy gray ceruminous discharge is what it's called, is not right. For me, the key thing is it causing the pet irritation? So if a dog's got dirty ears, but to all intents and purposes, it's fine, it's not showing any signs of pain or discomfort, and it's living its best life, then I'm okay with that, because I think, probably led by the profession, we as humans feel we need to be proactive, getting the hair out, getting the muck out, putting stuff down, Q-tips, cotton wool swabs. All of these interventions are creating some kind of trauma or micro trauma in the ear, to which the ear is going to respond with inflammation, and then we into that cascade again. So again, there is a balance, because if there's this excessive amount of unhealthy discharge in there, then ultimately we need to get it out. But I think we also need to be cognizant that in some cases it's just best to leave the environment, because any intervention is.
I'm so glad you've said that, Richard, because what I've found over the years with Betty, any dirt in her ears is just like a grey, waxy colour. But I just have to get it out super gentle, because if I go in there with some cotton wool and I'm, giving it a good clean, you can guarantee 100% she will end up with the red sore ear. And I eat touch wood, thank goodness, nowadays, never really bother her. But if I'm messing around with them, guaranteed they're going to be red and sore. So I get any big lumps out that I can see, but other than that, I just leave well alone. I'm like, not touching them.
I
we,
think
we get this as well, when we're answering questions and you're trying to scrape away the layers and trying to find that root cause, and there's a number of cases where people then mention something they've done to the ear, whether and you go, this is
over cleaning, over rubbing, over this.
something, yeah, and you think, okay, this is part of it, and we're trying to sort of reset it now. We're trying to put it back to where it was before they started all
Do it
that.
well, we do it well-meaning, don't we? We're like, oh yeah, make sure that's nice and clean, and we'll do this and we'll do that, and then you're like, oh, what have I done?
Yeah. I think Elizabeth asked a question like that: to pluck or not to pluck. As a general rule, I think not to pluck.
Yeah. She's a troublemaker.
She is.
Yeah.
She's a lovely, lovely lady.
Hi, Elizabeth. So that's she's a lady with the great photographs, I'll tell you about. Yeah. So that's a big question. Yeah, pluck or not to pluck. So in the end, they're there for, Mother Nature has them there for a reason. Just leave them alone.
If my wife had her way, my God, my ears would be on fire.
I go to the Turkish barber and they use the flame now, so I say, no plugging. Don't do that to the dogs, okay? I'm not suggesting.
That's ethical to take our dogs to the Turkish barber, but hey.
No, please. I did not say that. Somebody get me a lawyer quick. So, excellent. That was great. That covered quite a lot just in the unanswered question. Hopefully, Lindsay, you got your question. And
as well, Richard, I might be going off topic here slightly, but that the ears can flare up when the gut's not right. We'll find maybe, our members' dogs will be really settled. They've got them great. They've been great for, a year. And then for whatever reason, if something happened, if they've gone into a kennel or whatever, and they've given them a vaccine, boom, ears are off.
Yeah.
they've given them a chemical treatment for whatever reason. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most of the time, in my opinion and in my experience, ear problems, especially if they're bilateral, um, it's a systemic reaction 99 times out of 100. So that inflammation is coming from inside the body. That dog's immune system has been triggered, and it's manifesting itself as red ears.
Yeah.
So the problem is, well, part of the problem is the ears, but the underlying problem is internally. And so this is where this kind of a situation plays out, an adverse reaction to something in the food or a vaccine that is designed to trigger an immune response. That's what it does. And in some cases, it's a bell-shaped curve. When manufacturers produce vaccines, they are interested in the population. And they are creating a chemical that's going to stimulate 80-90% of an immune response, an adequate and suitable immune response in 80 to 90% of the population. But of course, it's a bell-shaped curve. So there's going to be some, 5% that don't react at all and don't develop any kind of immunity, and others that have an exaggerated response. And, if you're a pet owner, you're not really interested in population statistics, you're interested in your dog. But this is what we've got, this is what we have to deal with. So for me, dogs that are just kind of on the edge of immune-mediated immune-mediated diseases, whether it be IBD or allergic skin disease, or the dog equivalent of rheumatoid arthritis, or any of these immune-mediated conditions where the immune system is actually attacking the body. General rule of thumb, I'm not a fan of vaccinating those those particular individuals. I think each case has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and a risk assessment made. But physiologically, you're just asking for
Big trouble.
If you take a dog that's just on the edge and you hit them
We
with a vaccine,
see it all the time. I mean, luckily, most of our members now are, titer testing and doing all the other things. So thankfully, hopefully we kind of reducing that kind of thing. But it is still definitely it's an issue with with new members that are very new to all of this kind of thing, and that, oh yeah, we just took him last week for his booster, and then the ears are up and everything else. But anyway, sorry, I digress. Do we have anything else, Joe?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm picking because we had so many messages, questions. I'm trying to pick them out, and the ones that are relevant to what we've just been talking about. And this one's from Rachel Ruth. I'm just gonna again. I'm gonna read it straight out. I've tried everything with my lab. We get that people say a lot. I've tried everything. And you can tell they've just been through the ringer. They may not have tried everything, but they feel that way, and it's you can see they're having a tough time. Olive leaf, SEACT, colloidal silver, essential oils seem to be all that work, but still needs annual attention. Is there any way to make it go permanently? She doesn't say it's ears, but I think it is. It's because it's on the thread. I know it's gut related. She says she's always been raw fed, and I cut out chicken. It's a lot better and a lot and less frequent, but never fully gone. And again, this is where it ties into what we talked about earlier. Worse in spring and early summer. So suspect it's allergies in the springtime. Now, there's a couple of things I want to pick out here. She talks about again, we mentioned we end up talking to people who've done a number of treatments, and what we're trying to do is really set it back to the original settings, if you like, that get the microbiome back to where it was, whilst also saying, look, there's some other possible root cause that we gotta get to the bottom of it. Otherwise, it's just going to come back, and you can have repeat. Um, and the other thing, she's always been raw fed, and it's a really interesting thing that in your group, Carla, particularly, the dogs are so well looked after. Otherwise, people wouldn't be in the group, right? They wouldn't be spending their time asking questions and looking. So these dogs are, generally speaking, really well fed, and yet for us, the ear care and the dental care are the two number one products we sell. Given that that's mostly our marketplace is people who are looking after their dogs. So that's a really interesting thing. And then if you tie that comment into what she says, worse in spring and early summer.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what you were saying, maybe a pollen, maybe
Yeah.
reactions. Yeah, it's
I'd be interested to know if she's done a full elimination diet or whether she's only cut chicken out,
Yeah.
because just cutting chicken out, is good, because that would be one of the main proteins we would recommend to cut out. But without doing a full elimination diet, and I know it's hard work and time consuming, but you wouldn't really know if there is still some food triggers in there, even though it's worse in summer and spring. There's sounds like there is some environmental things going on. But
Yeah.
no, that's a really interesting thing because we notice in this resource we have of a few years now of answering these kind of questions. We find ourselves saying while you're looking for the root cause, you know, um, maybe have a chat with me again because this particular person's part of the group. She's already looking at it, but trying to point people in the direction of, talking to a nutritionist. Um, or you talked about stress, and there's been a couple of times where I've had to say, you know, tongue in cheek, go get yourself a glass of wine. Sit down. Your dog's grand. Let's look at you.
yeah,
So
it's so true, and it's such a massive how we are, and our energy and stress levels affect our dogs so much. And I can remember many years when I was relatively new to the natural health side of things and energy work and all that. I can remember having a consultation for Betty. I was at the end of my tether with her, with Alison Daniels from My Pet Nutritionist. And after the conversation, she said, "You're never going to heal, Betty, until you look at yourself. You really need to do some work on healing your own gut and healing how you are." Because I used to be quite, almost neurotic, like, "Oh my God, she's not well, and I love her so much, and I can't bear it." And poor Betty must have been thinking, "My God, what's wrong with me? I'm going to die."
yeah, yeah.
Where now I've gone the opposite way. I'm like, "Oh, you'll be okay."
Yeah.
It's
No,
really, really
this,
helped.
this the involvement of stress in our health and ill health, I think it's really come into focus in the last maybe couple of decades at the most. And for humans, and hence in the wellness space, lots of talk about and recommendations for meditation, yoga, contemplation, being present in the moment, being conscious, all of those kind of things, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm a believer in. Um, but then, as that relates to animals, I think the science is well in the veterinary world is catching up with the science in the human world. But obviously there's always going to be a bit of a gap because we can't obviously talk to our pets, we can't counsel them, we can't say, okay, are you stressed? What are you stressed about, etc., etc. But ultimately, as dog owners and cat owners and pet owners, I think we all have an intuitive sense of that. And we also know that our stress is reflected in our pets. So, whilst the science I think is interesting at this stage and perhaps not there, I think it's an absolute truth that stress in ourselves we transmit to our pets, and then they start to show symptoms of stress, which pop out in all sorts of weird and perhaps unexpected ways. Um, Upset tummies,
If
itchy.
I get really stressed, like really stressed, Betty starts throwing up.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah,
And these are animals that can tell when somebody's about to have an epileptic.
yeah. They're just
Um,
amazing, aren't they? But I don't want to go off topic too
yeah,
much, because
definitely.
talk about that till the cows come home. Well, I could.
I'm going to ask, there's a difficult question here. Clarenta says, my question would be, what can you do when you have a dog who does not allow you to clean their ears by squirting solution inside them? They only allow you to wipe. So this is a broad question because we get this. Given that we supply a little, something which is a spray, it's a tiny amount of dogs that have a problem with it. It's a surprising amount of low number, which is great. But I'd say use small amounts. You know, you don't need to have stuff sloshing about the dog's ear. Just a couple of sprays is going to wet the inside. Um, you can also just spray the outside and use a cotton ball as a cleaner. But really, because what Richard's just been saying, you really want to get the probiotics
in there.
inside.
Mm.
Inside, yeah, yeah. So spray them in.
So just wiping it with some cotton, a cotton ball wouldn't quite get in there
No.
enough.
But what you could do, we've had a couple of people, and I'd like to think that this was my idea, it wasn't one of my customers, just taking the lid off, spray into the lid, couple of sprays. It's going to look hardly anything in there, and just
That's a
fish it
great
off
idea.
it.
That's an absolutely brilliant idea.
Yeah. So but yeah, you would think more dogs would have a problem with the spray, but they don't, you
Yeah.
know.
And
It's
yeah, because it's aerosol, it's gonna make its way down there.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, there was one point I wanted to pick up on, and that is that, the way we think the probiotic approach works is, as we've talked about it extensively, is in the rebalancing of the biome and basically crowding out pathogens, not giving them a chance to compete for whatever resources are down there. But we also think that the bacteria, the probiotics, and pathogens for that matter, compete for organic molecules that are allergens in the air. So, who was it who was saying about she's changed. It's the lady with the lab. She's changed her dog to raw, and
Hmm.
things are much better. But she notices flare-ups in spring and summer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that dog probably has the allergy gene, if there is such. And as I said right at the beginning, we often find that if a dog is allergic, they are allergic to a number of different things. Some environmental factors and some dietary factors. It's usually not just one thing. Um, but when it comes to seasonal allergies and allergens that are in the air, like house dust, like pollens, these bacteria digest those allergens as part of their resource. So a secondary effect, particularly, and I think this is particularly effective in the in the
Mm-hmm.
dogs that are atopic,
Mm-hmm.
is that having a population, a thin population of friendly bacteria on the coat, particularly the hairless areas
Mm-hmm.
underneath the abdomen, on the snout, on the paws, and the ears. Having these bacteria just sitting there waiting, when these organic molecules, allergy particles, land on the skin, they are devoured by the bacteria before they have a chance to trigger an allergic response, local allergic response
Mm-hmm.
in the skin. So as a for that dog, during the spring and summer months,
Yeah,
yes,
Rachel. Yeah.
Rachel, um, it might be an idea to try the ear spray a couple of times a week, just to have friendly bacteria waiting there to feel these allergens that are floating around in the air,
Mm-hmm.
and couple that with the allergy spray for the
Yeah.
rest of the dog.
It's interesting because Lorraine Blower's question was I wasn't sure we'd get to it, Lorraine, because it's a long question. Thank you. But she mentions that her dog has got atopic dermatitis, and and she says in her question she's not a fan of just cleaning for the sake of the ears for the sake
Mm.
of cleaning them, but she has had Pseudomonas issues previously. So I think that's a great example of, yeah, where you're getting the probiotics onto the skin. Remember, the ear is an extension of that, and using the probiotics to keep those bad bacteria in check and reduce those bioallergens. So
Mm.
that would be the approach all across the line.
And just for the eco warriors out there, and I have a sense that a lot of your followers are eco warriors. What gives me some degree of satisfaction is that when this product is washed off the coat or finds its way into the environment, it's a commensal. It's doing absolutely no harm to the environment whatsoever.
Mm.
Um,
And in fact, if the probiotics haven't got food, they stay in spore form, so they're just going to stay asleep.
Yeah.
So they'll only vegetate. They'll only sort of like flower, if you like, germinate, probably a better word, if there's something for them to do. So we see that as infections reduce, so too the 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 probiotics that veget that what's the word I use? It was really good. Germinate. Thank you very much. Germinate. They also decrease, and so you see less of them in the space. Um, and I'm going to keep going here because I know we're nearly out of time, I guess,
Yeah.
Carla. But I'm squeezing in a couple of more questions. And one here is a really good one from Deb Hill. Cleans her dogs with, and she mentions a brand, I won't say, of antibacterial, a natural antibacterial. Um, but she shakes so bad she gets a hematoma. She uses thornic powder, which is good in some circumstances, but only in some certain circumstances, like when there's mites. And a very dark color comes out of the ear on a pad. It's not smelly, but she's shaking so bad she gets hematoma. So that's to be taken care of, I think. But I definitely would, going by what we just said here, I'd stop wiping out the microbiome with that. Um, if there's mites, throw powder. If there's not
yeah.
mites, not throwing powder. Don't clean, as I understand it. If you are going to use it, don't clean the ears first. You need to leave the ears dirty because the dirt is helping protect the inner ears from the thorn powder. So yeah, that's just a one I wanted to get answered as well while we were here. Thank you very much. And Amy Bemerich was asking, what's the best non-scary way to clean the ears? Um, hopefully we've answered that as well, but I'll give a fuller answer to that in the thread. Okay. So we've answered most questions. Carla, what about your questions? Have you got any?
I think no, I think really they've kind of all been answered. I think it's been really, really interesting learning about more about the ear as well. Because often a lot of our members, will present with the ear issue and we'll ask all the questions, but they kind of want us to just tell them, what they can put in it. And we very often say, ideally, you need to go to the vet and see what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with bacteria? Are you dealing with yeast? Or like what are you dealing with? We
Thanks, Stephen.
well, yeah, just stick this
Another
in,
one.
that in. And
Yeah.
what is the problem with the eardrum and
Yeah.
pouring loads of stuff in it? So we would always say first port of call, and like Richard said, if there's a really bad ear infection, you need to get on top of that inflammation before you start throwing a load of more gunk down into the ear, because it's not going to be helpful. So we, whilst we helping them figure out what's going on, we do generally say, have a pop to your vets, get some swabs done, get them to look in the ear and see what you're actually dealing with.
Mm.
Yeah, because some of those cases, and again, I'm straying into your territory here, Richard, so feel free to kick me. But some of those cases where it's the inflammation comes first and the infection comes because of the inflammation, not necessarily the other way around. And again, it brings you back to Richard's point about, finding what that root cause is.
Yeah.
And I've used as a rule of thumb what Richard said earlier. I remember you saying to me years ago, if it's 2 ears, it's it could be a lot of things. It could be
Mm.
systemic, it could be yeast. If it's 1 ear, chances are, emphasis on chances,
Yeah.
that it's a bacterial
Yeah.
uh, in infection. Now, I've got a question though. When so we let me phrase this correctly without getting myself in a lot of trouble. We end up speaking to people who've been to a vet, and they're not all as enlightened as certain vets,
Yeah,
and they've just come away with antibiotics, and then this has happened and that's happened, and all of a sudden we're getting a phone call, or we're getting an email of somebody who's like at the end of their tether. Um, and again, we go back to the setting, resetting. So like with eyes and ears and which is, again, we've said this a number of times in conversations, you can't be too careful. But if you are using an antibiotic and you're feeling confident, then get a probiotic in there
I
straight
agree.
afterwards.
It's
We
a
want to prevent the repeat cycle.
it is a difficult one for us because we have to tread a fine line, and we obviously want people to go and find out what it is, but then we don't necessarily want them to be taking loads of internal antibiotics when they could possibly try another route. I think for me, going to the vet really is, you want the diagnostics done to see what you're dealing with. Obviously, you can't go to the vet and them go, oh yes, it's this, that, and the other on that first appointment. You've got a dust allergy, you've got this allergy, but go and would you agree, get some swabs done to see what is going on, and let them look, try if you can look in the ear to see what state the ear's in as well.
Yeah.
I think as you've said, and as I said at the beginning as well, one really should go to whatever lengths are necessary to get a diagnosis. Um, and realistically, sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not possible. So sometimes one just has to take a best guess at what's going on. Um, and it's certainly in our practice, it's very rare that on the first visit we're going to do um, well, we usually do swabs for cytology to try to decide, if it's a gram-positive or gram-negative bacteria, which guides our treatment. But if the patient comes back with the same problem, then we'll generally go with the culture and sensitivity. And if it keeps coming back, then we'll do X-rays of the ear so we can assess, if there's any otitis media involvement. We'll have a look down the throat and see if it's actually a throat problem. We'll try to eliminate as much as we can in the hope that we can actually make a diagnosis and say the reason why this dog has got this infection at this moment is because of this.
That's really interesting about the throat. That had honestly never crossed my mind. That is so interesting. So also, if they had problems with the teeth, that could effectively cause an ear infection as well.
It's possible. I won't say that that's very common, a throat infection causing an ear infection.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to highlight that actually it's not just an infolding of the skin. The ear is a fairly complex bit of kit. And in order to kind of dig down to what's actually causing a problem there, we kind of need to be cognizant of the full anatomical and functional picture.
I'm
You know,
so pleased that you've touched on all that, because so many of our members, and understandably, they think, oh, well, it's just an ear infection. Tell me what I can put in it. And we just won't do that. We're like, we can't be telling you to put this, that, and the other in the dog's ear. You need to do a little bit. Obviously, we always recommend the ear care to have in.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's really interesting, Carla, because even with human beings, it's like, I've got an issue, give me a pill.
Yeah,
Well, can we talk a minute about what chemicals in your house? What, for that lady, what wool is in the blanket? No, just give me the pill.
yeah.
We're busy.
One of the sorry, I
No,
cut
no,
you
that's
off.
it. That's the point. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm personally fairly engaged in, if not passionate about, is this whole problem that the veterinary profession and the medical profession have created, which is the global problem of antimicrobial resistance, where we've, going back to Louis Pasteur and so-called germ theory, we've just had it in our minds that germs are bad, and whenever there's evidence of a germ, then we just need to take it out, as thoroughly and conclusively as we can, paying no attention to the fact that actually, we're busy wiping out 99% of the friendly bacteria and creating a massive problem for ourselves. Because say in the context of an ear, and I think this is another good reason to consider anyway, ear care or a probiotic approach, is if there is a pathogen in there and we do the culture and sensitivity, we decide it's effective against, this antibiotic is effective against this bug. We apply the antibiotic topically, we get rid of the bug. What we've actually done is we've created an open space for any old microbe to get in there. And I think we've dropped the ball as far as that's concerned. What we should be doing, if there is a pathogen, we've identified it, we've treated it effectively with an antibiotic, what we should then do is flood that space with friendly bacteria so that, the next pathogen that's on the bus is not going to actually take advantage of this situation that we've created.
Yeah.
And from a vet's point of view, classically, and I'm not saying all vets think like this, but if we have an ear case, that's a bacterial infection, we get rid of the infection and we confirm that we've got rid of it by doing a follow-up culture and sensitivity. If that culture result comes back, right, you had staphylococcus in there, and you now no longer have staphylococcus. Most of us think, job done, goodbye, next, please. And actually, that's the last thought we should be having. We should be saying, right, we've cleared the space. Now we need to get commensal. We need to get friendly bacteria in there. Otherwise, the exact same thing is just going to happen again. And, that over decades has created. So what happens is pathogens do invade that space, and now the more resistant ones, and ultimately this practice has selected for resistant bacteria and the whole global problem of antimicrobial resistance, which we hear increasing numbers of people going into hospitals and not coming out because they've picked up a nosocomial or an infection in hospital from a superbug, and they go in for something fairly minor and they don't come out because whilst in hospital they've picked up a superbug, which is obviously a tragedy, but it's a tragedy of our making. So I think the veterinary profession and the medical profession really need to wake up and firstly understand the damage we've done, but think inventively about how we're going to stop it happening in the future.
I'm so pleased you explained that so eloquently and so easy for people to understand as well.
I hope it is clear, because as you can see, when I get on a roll, words come out, and I hope it's understandable.
I just look at how we live now. Everything has to be so clean everywhere. I mean, I don't live like that. My house is just a lived-in home, but you go into some people's houses and they've got all the air freshers and the bleached tops and I'm like, oh my goodness me. And I think that's why people pick up all these different bugs and stuff like that. I mean, a little joke for you, as I know we're kind of finishing up now, but I have carpets in this house, and of course Betty's always rubbing her face and rubbing her bottom on them and goodness knows what. And I had a friend round for tea and she dropped a piece of food and normally would go, oh, it's the 3-second rule, pick it up, it's fine. I went, I probably wouldn't pick it. I'll probably buy the 3-second.
Yeah.
We had such a good laugh. But yeah, no 3-second rules in this house. And I mean, obviously, I was a little bit unwell at Christmas, but generally, touch wood, I'm generally pretty.
Well, that's another point, Karla. That if a little bit of bugs, few bugs here and there, just to prick your immune system and just keep it in
Keep you.
training. It's no bad thing, to
Mm.
keep you healthy, you know.
Yeah. Well, my car's pretty disgusting, so I always say to anybody if they need their immune system boosting, just come and sit in my car for 10 minutes.
You're welcome. Yeah.
You know, the last huge global craziness, and I know it's time to finish off, so I'll keep this brief, but the last global craziness we had was, of course, the pandemic, where very early on in the game, the microbiologists were saying, okay, guys, this is a virus, it's coronavirus. Best way to deal with it is soap and water.
Mhm.
So what happens actually is that the market gets flooded with sterilizing fluids and chemicals that kill 99.999% of bacteria. It's like, guys, this is not a bacteria. This is a virus, and the best way to deal with it is soap and water.
Mhm.
So the whole planet went crazy in sterilizing absolutely everything. And what that did to the planetary microbiome, I
But
hate to think.
you can imagine we were talking about this internally because obviously being our thing. And after I managed to pull myself down off the roof, while they were saying it was not airborne and having an air quality background and knowing this to be just rubbish. And then they said it is airborne. And then I think in the March we wrote as early as the first March we were writing that this is going to cause AMR with these hand sanitizers.
Yeah.
And the government didn't say use hand sanitizers. The government said wash your hands well.
Yeah.
And it didn't say with this soap or that soap, just wash your hands with soap and water well. And that was it. Sing happy birthday or whatever. And I think it was in the July then of that first year, in one of the dailies, there was a thing about reported antimicrobial resistance as happening
Mm.
from the hand sanitizers. But this is big business.
Yeah.
And this is big business for a business that was actually parts of it were on its knees. The whole um, hygiene world, certain parts of it were going crazy, and certain parts of it were dead on their feet because people weren't going to the offices, you know. So they were coming out with things like fogging and whatever, months, I mean, even years after it was already evident and proven that you didn't get COVID from a
Mm.
surface.
Mm. Mm.
You didn't need to sterilize the surface.
Yeah.
This is just chemicals that you're now going to breathe in. Um,
Sad.
so I think that the question there is what happens next? And again, this is
Yeah.
linked to what Richard was talking about, antimicrobial resistance. And we find ourselves advising this when you're thinking what you're going to do, what treatment you're going to use, what happens next? And if you're going to wipe out the microbiome, ask yourself what happens next.
Yeah. Make sure you add in some ear care.
Otherwise, something Mother Nature is going to add
Worse.
something else. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute joy. Honestly, I've learned loads, and it was just a real joy, and to confirm a lot of things that I already thought, and learn some new things. Which every day is a school day. So I'd love to do some more if ever either of you is up to doing some teeth and eyes and all the rest of the bits and pieces.
Well,
Hopefully,
now that we got the technology sorted, it'd be a shame not to, right?
me with my jug of gin. No, I'm only joking.
Leopard skin cup. You kidding me?
Oh, well, thanks again, guys. It was lovely to meet you, and I'm sure all of our members are very grateful for you spending this time with us tonight.
Thanks for having us on, Karla.
Yeah,
Thank you, Karla. It's just been great. And thank you, Lindsay, for the technical
yeah.
assistance.
Thank goodness. Thank you. I'm
Cheers
assuming
for now.
leave now. Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, fun. See you on the other side. Bye.
Bye.